Sports Talk Chicago. Skipper Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's the CEO of BuellerFootball.com, host of the Football GM podcast, and the director of player personnel for the Seattle Dragons. Please welcome Randy Mueller to the program. Randy, it's great to have you on. How are you?
Thanks, John. I'm doing great. Good to be back with you again.
Yeah, great to have you back. So much to discuss here with the Bears and with some national NFL news. We'll start with the Bears. What do you make of that Bears-Commanders game on TNF?
I felt like I was in a dentist chair for about 3 hours, but that's become commonplace for these primetime games, not just the Bears. It's been a lot of primetime events, and probably if I was Amazon, I might be asking for a little refund. It's crazy how the quality just hasn't been there this year for whatever reason. And maybe it's the lack of preseason action that a lot of players got, and the first few weeks have been like preseason, but hey, that's part of it. It's a long grind, so I'm hoping the quality gets better. That's for sure.
What do you see from Justin Fields in that game?
Well, I think I see skill sets. I know the cries out of Chicago about him not being this or not being that. And I'll be honest with you. I see what they saw when they drafted him. I see a very athletic kid with a big arm. I see some things that he can't do and still needs to progress at doing. I also see him continuing to be put in positions that are going to be a struggle for him. He's not going to process from the pocket and make all the reads and throws. And they're having trouble keeping him upright from that spot anyway. So sometimes I think it's forcing a square peg in a round hole. And maybe that's what you get until he moves along further in his progression at becoming an NFL quarterback. But I'm not ready to give up on him. I do think they've got to tailor-make some things, and I'm sure they know that as well. Tailor-made some things that he can do well until he gets the confidence. I think the hardest part for me to watch with regard to Justin was that far away look. He had that disconnected feel with offense. You know, is he really buying in? Does he know this is going to work? Does he believe it's going to work, or does he just hope it's going to work? You know, there's a lot of different levels of confidence when systems and plays that gets into you. So I'm still in favor of Justin Fields being the future of the Bears, but they're going to have to kind of take a couple veers off the main course of what Luke Getsy made the Packers, offense what it was in Green Bay, but this is not the Green Bay Packers, so we'll see.
Who's most to blame for this current situation? Is this a Fields issue? Is it an offensive line issue, wide receiver issue, Luke Getsy? Why is this happening?
Well, I think it's all the above, John, and it's part of just rebuilding, right? You've got to have all the tools in place. You've got to have everybody up to speed, and here's the hard thing about it. An on-the-job training situation is not good for the NFL. And we've got people on the job training. You've got head coach in his first role, coordinator in his first role, quarterback learning a second system in 2 years, an offensive line in flux built by a GM in his first year. I mean, there's a lot of on the job training going on. So it's just hard to have your expectations be what they should be in an NFL season. You've just got to hope that they can fast forward through this year somehow, some way, and build on it, because we're all better the longer we get to sit in the chair. And it's just hard when you have so much inexperience. You know what the saying is, right? Education is expensive. And this is one of those years for the Bears, I'm afraid.
Randy Mueller here on Sports Talk Chicago. Randy, when you were a GM, how long would you usually give a quarterback?
Well, I think you've got to give him 2 or 3 years, to be honest with you. And in this case, when you change systems on him after year one, it kind of restarts the clock, right? He is still learning and really memorizing an offense and a scheme. He's nowhere near ready to work on the tricks of his trade. He can't get the second level stuff, third level stuff like NFL veteran quarterbacks can get, because he's still learning what's going on. He barely understands what they're asking him to do. That's why I think that the things that could help him progress long-term are going to have to happen in time. You can't rush it. And while he learns how to process information and do what they want to do in year 3 and 4, they're going to have to set up some offensive things that give him some predetermined reads, some targets where he doesn't have to sort through things to get to the right target. And I think that comes with some play action, that comes with some moving around in the pocket. It almost sounds like the reincarnation of Mitch Trubisky, to be honest with you. It's stuff we talked about a few years ago. And I think the Bears struggled to put Mitch in the right spot. And this it's not easy. It's a hard process to make. But I think if we're going to make him stand in the pocket and process information it's going to be a long season because that's not what he does. And they can't protect him in that spot anyway. So why try to do it?
Why can the Bears never develop a quarterback? That's a big question, but why is it always an issue?
Well, I think I'll say this, and again, it's not anybody's particular blame, but evaluating quarterbacks is done pretty successfully around the league, and it's done better by some than others. I don't know their criteria. I don't know how they dig in and do it. I've never really struggled with that part of it, from the evaluation part. But then you have to develop them. You've got to give them tools and answers on offense. And you can't make it so simple that the defense can't stop, can't figure things out either. So there's a fine line. If you went to strictly play action, predetermined routes and targets, the defense would kill you. That's just the way they are. They're good, and defensive coaches are good. So there's a fine line there. But as far as developing it, I think you've got to grin and bear it, no pun intended, for 2 or 3 more years and see where he comes out on the other end.
What was your process in developing a quarterback and then evaluating whether or not you should stick with them after a couple of years?
Well, I think it depends on the system, and it depends on where you are as a franchise for sure. I think a wide open passing attack is great on paper. You can make it sound like, hey, we're doing everything we can to give this kid the best chance ever. He was not polished coming out of Ohio State. He held the ball too long there. So that's not, going to change overnight. It's just going to take time. Zach Wilson wasn't ready, but he was further along than Justin Fields was, in my opinion, coming out of college. And now you're just starting to reap some of those rewards, and he's in the second year of his system. Justin Fields hasn't had that. And that's been a problem for the Jets back going to the last 10 years. They've struggled to evaluate and develop quarterbacks too. So it's not just the Bears, but I think you just got to give him time, and you've got to give him a system that he can get confidence built up so that he can progress to level 2 and level 3 type things that the NFL guys do.
What do you see good out of Fields today?
I see a very good athlete. I see a big, strong arm. I see a guy that can make plays happen on the edge. All things that we said about him coming out of Ohio State. The other thing that I think they've got to do better is they've obviously got to protect him. They've got to find a way to block. They're not going to run or pass if they can't block any better than they've done, and they know that. The weapons are limited on the outside. It's a total rebuild. You don't get these jobs and come in to a polished, machine, right? I've been through it 2 or 3 times, and it's a struggle. It's hard to get things turned around quickly, but I do think they have the right people there. I think they'll find a way to make the offense tailor-made a little better for the quarterback in time, and then they've got to find some weapons for him to throw the ball to.
What do you think needs to be improved upon weapons-wise? Like, what do they need? Is there anybody on this team that's worth keeping right now?
Well, I don't know the guys like you do. I mean, your leading receiver, I believe, has 17 catches. So that's not anything to write home about. And that's really not a reflection of him per se, but the system's got to sort a little bit of that out. I don't think you can ever not be looking to upgrade. And I'll say this, when I get a quarterback like Justin Fields, I'm going to get him backs that can catch. I'm going to get him a couple of tight ends that he can lean on, and maybe a slot receiver or 2 that can get open. So I've got guys I can trust. When I'm in a jam, I'm finding them. And sometimes it's bigger guys. Phillip Rivers for years used to go to Antonio and he'd throw him the ball whenever he got in trouble. And it was 6'5" throwing to 6'5". There's something to be said for that. You've got to get guys that are open even when they're covered. And then Justin's got to rely on that to get them when he's in trouble with the ball. So there's a lot of things. It can be complicated, but I think patience is the hardest thing to come by, especially when you're struggling at 2-4.
How important is that safety blanket type wide receiver? I know you mentioned Antonio Gates and Phillip Rivers. When you were a GM, did you do something like that for your quarterbacks? Find somebody who could be a safety blanket, and did it work out?
Oh, yeah. I think you always have to be cognizant of that. Again, you have to involve your backs as well. I don't think the backs with the Bears are catching a ton of balls, so that's not really an option. I think you've got to give this kid checkdowns. You've got to give him easy throws. And really the last thing on his mind when he leaves every huddle, if I'm Justin Fields, should be, where's my fail safe? Where's my fallback? Where's my check down? And I mean, I played quarterback throughout college. It was the one thing I remember always. And maybe it was because I wasn't as good as these guys, but I wanted to have somewhere to throw the ball when all else fails. I don't know if that's the case. It's hard for us on the outside because we don't know what they're asking him to do per se. But I do know this, that you've got to have check downs. You've got to have dump offs. You've got to have all these things that also keep you from taking sacks too.
Who was the best quarterback that you drafted and developed yourself?
I'll be honest with you. We didn't draft one. I've never drafted one in the first round. We signed John Kitna, who played 13 years in the NFL as an undrafted free agent. Signed Warren Moon, who was already close to Hall of Fame status. My years in New Orleans, we had Aaron Brooks, we had Jake Delhomme, we had two more guys, Jeff Blake. All three were on our 1 year roster, and they all became NFL starting quarterbacks. So they can come in all shapes and all sizes. Hey, look at the team the Bears are facing this week. Bailey Zappi, fourth round pick. It's not like you got to go up high to get these guys. They're there. But that's what I mean. You've got to be able to have a knack for identifying what these traits are and then bring them into a system that can develop them. So you don't have to pick them high in the first round, in my opinion.
What are those traits? Because you had a lot of success getting these undrafted guys, these late round guys. What are the traits that you look for in finding maybe a value quarterback or somebody that you could use that wasn't necessarily a top pick?
Well, I think there's a couple things. And again, everybody's criteria is different, but I always found that I got to have a guy that can get the ball out. I think that's the most underutilized skill set in the league. These guys get rushed and they're all going to be under the gun. They've got to be able to get the ball out and they got to be able to throw accurately. Nowadays, you have to be somewhat able to process information because the tons that go into each play, the guy on the street would shake his head and beat it against the wall because he couldn't compute all the information that these guys have to take in and push out every snap. So those are really important. I always like to have a big guy because the pocket is never clean. It's seldom clean now, and you've got to be able to stand the being jostled around in the pocket. And I think Justin has all these skill sets. Now it's a matter of just putting together a system that can get him over the hump and give him some time to feel comfortable.
What would you do right now if you were in Brian Poles' chair?
Watch, grin and bear it. Hope that your coaches can shape some kind of an offense around this guy's skill set. But you'd have had that conversation before you ever hired anybody. That would have started way back last February or January, whenever that was. So I would be trying to find better weapons. I would be trying to upgrade my offensive line any way I could. I would probably spend a lot of time, and maybe Ryan does, is on the road as well. There's not much you can do around the office on Thursdays and Fridays. So I would always spend my time traveling and finding college players that I really wanted to target come the end of the season. So I'm sure he's doing some of that. He came up on the scouting end. He doesn't need my advice, that's for sure. But there are some things you can kind of look ahead and try to help your team with. And I would make a bunch of effort to trade people on trade deadline, which is coming up November 1st. That's not where these guys are going to get rich and rebuild this franchise. It's going to be through the draft and identifying some ascending free agent talent, not guys that have already made it where we got to pay big money to, but some ascending younger guys that may not have worked out somewhere else. Those are the keys that I think. And I've had luck doing that. You can find free agents that are either restricted or after their fourth year that haven't played, haven't been productive. Maybe it's injury. You've got to take a little bit of risk on those guys. It's less financially. I think those guys help you rebuild faster than just draft picks. So it's a combination.
What was an example of that you did either in Seattle or in New Orleans or Miami?
Well, when I went to New Orleans, we changed, I want to say 35 of the 53 guys on our roster the first year. Wow. And we didn't have draft picks. So we had to identify a bunch of those young ascending talent guys. We signed a corner who was in Seattle. This is one thing, not to change the subject, but if I was Ryan, I would identify guys with the Chiefs that he knows that he was part of drafting. And for whatever reason, they hadn't worked out. I brought 5 or 6 guys with me from the Seahawks to New Orleans that very first year. And they knew how we wanted to do things. They kind of knew the system, and I knew them. And I knew they were good quality guys. So they fit in and helped us come together as a team fast. We went to the playoffs our first year. Those are tough, goals to follow. We all want to do that, but it takes some identifying of, like I said, ascending talent to get you there.
When do you expect the Bears to be good again, Randy?
That's a tough question, but I would assume that they will be progressing by season's end. I really do. I think you ought to be able to see that this team's coming together a little bit. And I would hope by next year, you see it doesn't necessarily always take shape in the form of the wins and losses, but this is a team that's got to be competitive every week at some point. Otherwise, you're probably not pulling the right triggers. Obviously Ryan needs help. He can't build it himself. I don't know the people he's hired around him, but if I was him, I'd find some veteran eyes and evaluators to kind of help do some of this. Everybody always wants to have their guys, but I always wanted to make sure, and this wasn't hard for me, I wanted to make sure I wasn't the smartest guy in the room, that I hired a bunch of experienced guys because, like I said, education is expensive and I want their opinions. I really want it open. I want people to tell me what they think about players, and I can look at film and tell you myself, but I want others' opinions because none of us are smarter than all of us.
I remember we talked when Brian Pace was fired by the Bears. You, of course, used to be his boss, and you said at the time he didn't necessarily surround himself with the right people that hurt him. So obviously that's pretty important to be a GM. If you surround yourself with the wrong people, you could be out of a job.
Well, you saw what happened with Ryan. I think he was kind of rushed into the situation to start with. He had only been the personnel director 1 year, I believe, at the Saints. So I'm not sure he was, and he would probably admit that he was even ready for that. It would have been a real good opportunity for him to add some veteran caps, some people who had been around a little bit. He didn't really do that. And again, we saw the results of that. So hopefully Ryan Poles does things a little different and surrounds himself with people he can trust. Same with Matt. And that's really the way you gain ground, is to find and evaluate players better than the next team.
Randy Mueller, still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Randy, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, the Dragons. How's it been going?
It's been going good. We don't have a team yet. We have a couple quarterbacks, but that's about it. We have a draft coming up in November, and we have been grinding like crazy. And I love the building process from scratch. And we've got a good coaching staff. We've got a good group of guys, and we're really populating a draft board just like we do in the NFL. So we're anxious to actually put what we have on paper on the field, and that starts mid-November for the XFL guys.
What's the process been like in making that draft board and then also grabbing the quarterbacks that you got too?
Yeah, it's been fun for me because that's what I've done my whole life. So putting together a criteria with the coaches who I know well, Jim Haslett's our head coach. June Jones is our offensive coordinator. He and I have had a long history together. So it's like riding a bike. We can get together, all of us, and we kind of know exactly, or I should say, I know what they want to do on both sides of the ball. So it's easy for me to fit guys in, knowing what Jim does. Jim was with me in New Orleans. So we go way back, and that part of it's been good. I think the quarterback part of it, and we've kind of loosely attached ourselves with a couple quarterbacks that we've selected. And so those are guys that and I guess the best thing I like is that they're going to battle for a job. And these XFL games, or whether any spring league, the film that these guys can produce 10 weeks in the springtime is like a tryout for 32 teams. And it's fun to see these guys when they come to us. It's for the right reasons. They want to get on tape. They want to show what they can do. And it's a great opportunity for these guys. So I look forward to helping some of our guys get back to the NFL.
Would you be open to revealing who the quarterbacks are, or is that too early to ask?
I think I'm going to sit on that right now, John, just because I don't know who knows. And sure. I know they know, and because we're already working with them. And I think the other 7 teams know that as well. But I'll let the Rock and those people and make the announcements. I'm going to stay in my lane at my pay grade and just keep building the team.
How would you describe what you want your roster to look like?
I want it to look like what our schemes reflect on offense and defense. I mean, it's easy to say, yeah, we want big, fast guys, but we're like, what we really want is guys to fit. June Jones has a unique offense. It is the run and shoot. It is 4 wide outs. It is 1 back. We don't have a tight end, and we're going to throw the ball 75, 80% of the time. And these positions that he has have specific roles and criteria. So my goal is to fit guys into those roles. Same thing on defense. Ron Zook is our defensive coordinator. Him and Jim Haslett have worked together for years. I know exactly what kind of players, what they want to do with our players. Now it's up to me to find them. It'll be a 3-4 scheme that uses third down pressure packages. So we got to have a few pass rushers. If they're undersized, I don't really care. Think of the Steelers and the guys they rush the passer with. Could be 5'10", 5'11", 6-foot guys, but they can still rush the passer. So that it more than measurements or eye test or winning, getting off the bus. I would hope our system and our team reflects what our coaches want to do on either side of the ball.
What's going to be the expectation for this year? How lofty do you have your standards for this season?
Well, I would hope we are going to win the thing. That's our goal. I mean, I'll be disappointed if we don't. I think from a league standpoint, it is it's been proven to be viable that people will watch spring football. I think the quality of our game will be better than the last XFL. And that's really all I can speak for. I have found the quality of players this year that aren't in NFL camps or on NFL rosters is crazy good, John. Whether it's because of COVID or the colleges having an extra 6 year, there's a lot of really good players on the street that didn't get opportunities or that got released, more so than I've ever seen in all of my years in the NFL. So it's a good time to be building a team from scratch.
Randy, before we finish up today, last question. What made the Saints training camps your favorite ones in your career?
The passion of the fans, without a doubt. I mean, we had training camp in Thibodaux, Louisiana. That's 60 miles south of New Orleans. When somebody said, hey, you should go to 60 miles south and check it out, I said, well, we're going to have practice in the middle of the sugarcane field. That's in the swamps. There's nothing down there. We went down there and checked this out. We would practice every other day at night. We'd practice 7:00 at night. We would pack Nickel State. There would be 14,000 people in there watching us practice. They would cheer and boo walkthrough. And I used to say, do they know we don't want to make the play on the ball and knock it down? It's a walkthrough. The fans are awesome. And that's really what did it for me. It was the best football environment I've ever been around.
Well, Randy, thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate the insights as always. Best wishes with the XFL and looking forward to the next time we chat too.
Thanks, John. Looking forward to it anytime.